You know those moments in life, the ones that hit you so hard, so fast, that the world kind of just goes silent for a second? I was having one of those moments. And it wasn't because of a car crash or some natural disaster. No, it was because of Jake, my husband, standing in the middle of our living room, looking like he was delivering a corporate layoff notice instead of shattering my entire life. It was December. Not even mid-December, but early enough that the house smelled like pine needles and the cheap cinnamon candle I only pull out once a year. I was actually on a ladder, hanging the ridiculously oversized wreath above the fireplace, trying to get it perfectly centered, you know, the way only an overly committed home decorator can. The Christmas music was playing, something horribly cheerful, probably Bing Crosby, and everything felt cozy and normal. Peaceful even. Rachel, Jake started, his voice completely flat, devoid of the usual teasing or even annoyance he normally reserved for my excessive holiday enthusiasm. I didn't even look down, I just gave a grunt. Hold on, babe, I need you to spot me. This thing weighs like 20 pounds. He didn't move. I glanced down finally, holding the wreath with one hand, and that's when I saw his face. It was set hard like a statue carved from bad intentions. His eyes weren't even looking at me, they were scanning the room, almost evaluating the furniture. It gave me a weird, cold prickle up my spine. I need you to come down, he repeated, his tone making it an order, not a request. I sighed, climbed down the last few rungs, and dusted off my hands, the glitter from the fake berries sticking to my jeans. What is it, Jake? You look like you just found out the plumbing exploded again. He took a deep breath, the kind people take right before they say something utterly life-altering and usually horrible. We need to talk. Seriously talk. I folded my arms, suddenly feeling defensive. Okay, let's talk. But hurry up, I want to get the stockings out next. There won't be any stockings, Rachel. Not for us. See, here's where the silent part happened. The Bing Crosby song, the furnace hum, the distant sound of a neighbor's dog barking. It all just disappeared. What are you talking about? He had the audacity to shift his weight and put his hands in his pockets, like this was just another minor inconvenience he had to deal with. Look, this isn't easy, but I'm moving on. We're done. Done. A 7-year marriage, a relationship that started in college, built a home, 2 dogs, a ridiculous amount of IKEA furniture, and he summed it up with, we're done. But the truly shocking part, the part that makes my blood still run cold when I think about it, was what he said next. And I need you to move out. As soon as possible. By the end of the month, ideally. Actually laughed. It was a shaky, ugly sound. Move out. Jake, this is our house. What are you even saying? He sighed, the martyr of his own terrible decision. I'm saying I want a divorce and I want you to leave. I'm ready for the next chapter of my life, and frankly, you're not in it. He made it sound like I was a broken appliance he was finally getting around to replacing. My head was spinning. Where did this even come from? We had fought, sure, everyone fights, but there was no huge blow-up, no dramatic reveal. Just this cold, calculated eviction notice, served right next to the twinkling Christmas tree. You can't be serious, I whispered, the laughter gone, replaced by a sudden, intense heat of betrayal. Where would I go? Why do I have to leave? This is my home too. Well, technically it's my home, he said, puffing out his chest slightly. That little statement, delivered with such sickening smugness, was the first tiny warning sign, the first tremor before the earthquake. We've been saving for a long time, Rachel, and I need to do what's best for me now. The house is a big asset and I'm keeping it. I stared at him, trying to recognize the man I had promised forever to. The man who was currently holding my heart in his hand and casually squeezing. He wasn't even looking sad. He looked relieved. Eager. There's someone else, isn't there? I didn't need him to answer, but I needed to hear it. The confirmation. His face softened, but not with apology. With a sickening kind of wistful longing. Yeah. Look, this person, she understands my career, she supports me, she's different. Different? Is that what 7 years is? Something you just discard for different? The tears were starting to blur the edges of the room, but I fought them back. I wouldn't cry in front of this stranger wearing my husband's face. He didn't even have the decency to look guilty. She's already looking for a place nearby. We want to start our life together. He gestured around the living room, dismissing my decorations, my efforts, my whole presence. I need this space. The audacity of it. He was basically telling me, get out, the new model is arriving and she needs room for her luggage. I was the one who painted these walls, who picked out the sofa, who spent 6 hours last weekend cleaning out the gutters because he was too busy. My voice finally came out steady, icy. And you think you can just hand me an eviction notice? We're married, Jake. It's half mine. We'll settle up. He waved his hand dismissively. I'll give you a decent settlement. But the house stays with me. It just makes more sense. It made his future sense. That's all he cared about. His selfish, pathetic next chapter. I felt the rage building, the hot, necessary kind of anger that fuels action. But I also felt something else, something small and cold in the back of my mind. A tiny voice whispering about paperwork. About signatures. About a very specific evening about 2 years prior. He was still talking, droning on about logistics, about being adults, and keeping things amicable. He had already checked out of the marriage, and now he just wanted the paperwork to reflect his current self-serving reality. I need you gone, Rachel, he concluded, planting his feet firmly. This is happening. I swallowed, the taste of betrayal bitter on my tongue. So, you want me to pack up my entire life, leave the home I built so you can move your different person in before Christmas? It's not ideal timing, I know, but yes. The sooner you go, the easier this is. He thought this was easy. He thought he had all the power. He thought he held all the cards. But he was forgetting one crucial thing, a detail he had overlooked, or perhaps just conveniently forgotten in his self-obsessed planning. I looked at the wreath, still hanging crookedly. I looked at the smug, entitled look on my husband's face. And I smiled. Not a nice smile. A cold, challenging one. Tell you what, Jake, I said, my voice dangerously soft. How about we talk about the deed? And the refinancing papers you made me sign 2 years ago. His face twitched. Just a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor of unease. He quickly covered it up with a patronizing chuckle. Don't be ridiculous, Rachel. You signed the mortgage agreement. We both did. That's not the deed. Oh, it's not the mortgage I'm talking about, Jake. I mean the deed. The one you slipped in with about 100 other forms that night. The one that made me the sole owner of this house. The silence returned, but this time, it was filled with his sudden, dawning terror. Just a quick pause right here. If you're feeling the betrayal already, drop a comment below and tell me what time and place you're watching this video. I love seeing where my stories travel. I watched him try to process that. The panic was slowly leaching the confidence right out of his eyes. That's when I knew. The game had just changed completely. The look on Jake's face in that moment was priceless. Pure, unadulterated fear, mixed with a frantic scramble to remember exactly what he had signed, or more accurately what he had made me sign. He tried to keep his composure, though, the self-important mask slipping back on, albeit a little shaky this time. Rachel, you're being hysterical, he scoffed, forcing a chuckle that sounded more like a cough. You've got the date wrong, or you misunderstood the documents. I wouldn't do something like that. Oh, he definitely would. And that's where the backstory comes in. The necessary context of how a man who saw me as an inconvenience had managed to completely mess up his own plan for a swift, painless eviction. Jake and I had been married for 7 years, together for 10. When we first bought this house, it was a wreck. Like a real fixer-upper. I, the naive romantic, saw potential and cozy future. Jake, the pragmatic accountant in training, saw asset appreciation and low initial cost. The truth is, I was the one who poured the literal sweat equity into it. I spent weekends ripping up terrible carpet, painting every room twice, and even teaching myself basic plumbing off YouTube because Jake was always too busy with his career. But the house was always jointly owned, a standard marital deed. Until 2 years ago. Jake had started working for a smaller but very ambitious financial firm. This job required him to be constantly liquid, as he put it. He started pushing for us to refinance our home. Not because the interest rates were particularly good, but because he wanted to pull out a significant chunk of equity. He framed it as a necessary evil for his career growth. He claimed he needed to use the funds as collateral for a high-risk, high-reward investment fund. An investment that would supposedly make us independently wealthy in 5 years. I was hesitant. Very hesitant. I hate debt. And I certainly didn't like the idea of risking our house on his vague, sophisticated investment scheme. Look, Rachel, he had badgered me one evening, leaning over the kitchen island, papers spread out everywhere. You don't understand the market. This is a sure thing. If we don't do this now, we miss the boat. And think of it, we could pay off your parents' mortgage. We could travel first class. Stop being so emotional about a piece of paper. The emotional manipulation was heavy. He constantly implied that my hesitation was holding him back, that I didn't support his success. This went on for weeks. Every dinner, every quiet moment, it was the refinancing, the refinancing. He wore me down. Finally, one rainy Tuesday night, he brought home the stack of documents. It was enormous. Closing papers, legal disclaimers, mortgage amendments, title insurance policies. Hundreds of pages of tiny font and legal jargon. He laid them out on the dining table, impatient. Just sign here, here, and here, he instructed, tapping the spots with a pen, not even looking up from his phone where he was already fielding a call from his new, demanding boss. The notary is coming tomorrow, so it has to be done tonight. Hurry up. I remember feeling exhausted and rushed. He was pressuring me, tapping his foot, giving me that annoyed look that said, "Why are you making this harder than it has to be?" I felt terrible for being inconvenient. I picked up the pen and started signing. But here's the crucial life-altering detail he forgot. I'm the child of a paralegal. My mom always drilled into me, Rachel, never ever sign a document without reading the bold print and the section headings. So, while he was distracted, typing aggressively on his phone and huffing, I did skim the stack. And then I saw it. Tucked about 50 pages in, disguised under a generic title about property designation change, or something equally boring, was a new deed amendment. It wasn't transferring the deed to Jake alone, which would have been suspicious enough. It was transferring the deed to me. Sole ownership. My heart hammered. Why would he do that? I paused and looked at him. He was completely oblivious, engrossed in his phone call. I flipped back and read the relevant paragraph, a very complex, confusing one about protecting assets in high-risk investment vehicles. I didn't understand the why then, but I understood the what. If the investment failed, the house, my home, would be shielded from the creditors because it was legally and solely mine. It wasn't an act of love. It was an act of extreme financial self-preservation, ensuring that if his scheme crashed and burned, he wouldn't lose the only tangible asset we had left. He was essentially using me as a legal shield, a kind of human asset protection trust. The document was meticulously worded to ensure that his creditors could not touch the property, as long as it was legally registered only in my name. I realized he was willing to transfer ownership to me temporarily to protect himself from ruin, without ever intending for me to feel like I actually owned it. He saw it as a temporary shell game. I was furious that he hadn't told me, that he'd tried to slip it past me as a routine document. It confirmed my suspicion. He was willing to lie and manipulate me when it came to money. But I saw an opportunity to. I didn't ask questions. I didn't say anything. I just signed the deed transfer, signing the document that legally made the house mine. I also signed all the other 100 papers, the mortgage, the insurance, everything. He got his refinancing money, his investment capital, and I got the deed to the house. Jake never looked at the paperwork again. He just took the whole stack, assumed everything was in order, and promptly filed it with the notary and the county records, completely confident that the house was secure. Secure for him to retrieve later, of course, once his investment paid off. He literally never brought up the ownership change again, treating me and the house exactly the same as before. He just assumed that whenever he decided to sell or change the ownership back, I'd sign the papers without question, just like I had the first time. The man was so focused on the money he was getting out, he completely forgot the legal trap he had set for himself. And now, 2 years later, standing here with the stench of his betrayal and a fresh eviction notice ringing in my ears, the memory of that night was suddenly the brightest, most crucial piece of information in my mind. He hadn't just forgotten he signed it. He'd forgotten that he made me the sole legal owner to protect his own greedy hide. "You signed the refinancing papers too, Jake," I reminded him, my eyes locked on his. He was rapidly running through the scenarios in his head, trying to recall the fine print. "Remember that big pile? The one you rushed me through? There was a clause in there, Jake. A very specific clause that designated me as the sole legal owner for asset protection." His eyes widened slightly, the realization dawning slowly, agonizingly. "That was for the creditors, Rachel. That was a legal firewall. It was a formality." "A formality," I repeated, lifting one eyebrow. "In the eyes of the law, Jake, a signature is a signature. And a deed is a deed. You told me to sign that night to protect your investment, and I did. And you signed too, confirming the transfer and the subsequent mortgage on the property. What you failed to realize, however, is that an asset protection scheme that transfers the title to your spouse also legally transfers the house to your spouse. Permanently. He was stammering now, his composure finally failing. That's not, you can't, we're married. It's marital property. A judge will overturn that. We were married, I corrected, the past tense a sharp knife between us. But legally right now as we stand here, Jake, this house is in my name only. You signed the paperwork, you filed the paperwork, and you rushed the whole thing because you were too busy to be honest with me. You created this situation, not me. You wanted to protect your assets from the world, but in the process you exposed yourself to me. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked around the beautiful living room, the room I had decorated, the wreath I had just hung, and the fear was now a concrete, visible thing. He was starting to realize that his careful, selfish planning to secure his future had instead handed me the key to his eviction. Jake was spiraling, but the truly sickening thing was that his panic wasn't rooted in losing me, or the shame of his infidelity. It was purely about the loss of the asset. The house. His precious, appreciating investment that he was so convinced was his to keep. He kept running his hands through his hair, pacing a tight little circle on the expensive rug I had bought last year. This is ridiculous, Rachel. You're trying to leverage a technicality, he spat, trying to regain his dominant stance. You think I'm just going to walk away from my principal residence? I'll call my lawyer right now. This is fraud. You took advantage of me. The sheer hypocrisy of that statement almost made me laugh again. Fraud? You slipped a title transfer under a pile of papers, hoping I wouldn't notice, Jake. You were trying to protect your future profits from your risky scheme. I signed exactly what you presented to me. Now you're mad because the legal protection you put in place is protecting me from you. The argument was circular, fueled by his entitlement. But as the tension ratcheted up, the front door chime rang. A cheerful, musical little trill that seemed utterly out of place for the brewing domestic war. Jake froze, his eyes darting to the door. And then a sickeningly sweet smile, one that didn't reach his panicked eyes, plastered itself onto his face. Oh, that must be her. Willow. He was bringing his replacement to my house, in the middle of a massive argument, before I had even agreed to leave. The disrespect was a physical blow. He strode over to the door and flung it open. Standing there was a woman who looked like she'd stepped straight out of a glossy lifestyle magazine, maybe 5 years younger than me, impeccably dressed with that perfect, overly curated blonde hair and a smile that radiated confidence and pure, unadulterated opportunism. She was carrying a huge monogrammed weekender bag. She wasn't just visiting, she was moving in. Jakey Bear, she chirped, and the nickname made my stomach churn. She sashayed past him, not even acknowledging my existence for a second, surveying the living room with an air of casual ownership. Oh, this is even bigger than the pictures, Willow announced, placing her expensive bag right by the pristine white sofa. I love the light. Did you get the cleaner out of here? I can't stand old house smells. I stood perfectly still watching the scene unfold. It was like watching a bizarre, horribly written play. Jake walked over, wrapping a possessive arm around her waist, shooting me a look that was supposed to be triumphant, but was still layered with nervous sweat. Willow, this is Rachel. Rachel, this is Willow, Jake introduced us, his tone sickeningly casual. Rachel was just getting ready to pack up some things. Willow finally turned her gaze to me, her eyes sweeping me up and down with open condescension. She was practically wearing a sign that read, I am the upgrade. Oh, hi, Willow said, not offering her hand. Her smile was sharp, almost predatory. Jake has told me so much about you. How you're just not aligned with his vision anymore. It's hard when partners hold you back, you know? But I'm going to take good care of his home now. His home, I repeated, tasting the words like ash. This was the layered conflict. Not just the betrayal but the physical intrusion, the immediate attempt to erase my history, my personality, my life from the walls of the house I legally owned. Yes, his home, Willow confirmed, looking utterly bored with the conversation. We're going to paint this room a much softer gray. And that wreath. Darling, is that plastic? We can't have plastic in the main viewing space. I'll get the decorators in tomorrow. The audacity. She was already planning renovations on the house she didn't own, based entirely on Jake's lie that he had secured the property. She was his trophy, his symbol of a better life, and she was already treating me like the maid who hadn't been properly dismissed. Don't worry about the wreath, Willow, I said, finally moving towards her, my steps slow and deliberate. You won't be here long enough to see the next holiday season, let alone tomorrow. Willow recoiled slightly, finally seeing the cold fury in my eyes. Excuse me. Jake immediately jumped in, nervous energy practically vibrating off him. Rachel, stop this. Be an adult. Willow, ignore her, she's just upset. He squeezed Willow's shoulder a little too tightly. Upset? I scoffed. He tells me to move out of my own house, Jake. He tells me I'm being replaced by this decorator. And you think upset covers it? I turned my full attention to Willow, who was now genuinely starting to look uncomfortable. You need to understand something, Willow, I said, my voice low. Jake told you this was his house, right? That I was just the soon-to-be-gone ex-wife who was packing up her bags. Willow looked at Jake, demanding confirmation. That's what you said, Jakey. That she was leaving and we could start moving in right away. Jake was trapped. He couldn't lie to Willow without immediately exposing his current panic about the deed, but he couldn't tell her the truth without completely ruining his successful man persona. She is leaving, honey. She's just being difficult about the settlement. We're negotiating. Negotiating what? I challenged him, the rising tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. The right for you to stay here on my property? Willow's eyes narrowed, finally sensing the true nature of the stakes. Wait, what is she talking about, Jake? Nothing, Willow, it's just nonsense. She's trying to get more money. He tried to physically steer Willow away towards the kitchen, towards distraction. No, I'm not, Willow, I insisted, stopping them. I'm talking about legal ownership. I'm talking about the fact that Jake, in his infinite financial wisdom, signed the deed over to me 2 years ago to protect his assets from a bad investment. Which means, Willow, as of this moment, you are standing on property that is legally 100% mine. The woman he is trying to kick out is the sole recorded owner of this address. I watched the color drain from Willow's expertly made-up face. She looked from me to Jake and back again, realizing she hadn't just snagged a successful boyfriend. She had walked straight into a massive legal mess and was currently standing in a stranger's home. Is that true, Jake? Willow asked, her voice losing all its sugar. The nickname Jakey Bear was nowhere to be found. Did you sign the house over to her? Jake looked absolutely miserable. He had to lie or admit he was both a terrible husband and a financial moron who had screwed up his own selfish plan. He chose a desperate half-truth. It was a temporary legal maneuver, Willow, I told you. It's just technicalities. She has no intention of keeping it, he pleaded, completely forgetting that he was supposed to be evicting me. Oh, but I do, Jake, I cut in, my smile widening into a triumphant, cold grin. In fact, I've changed my mind. I'm not leaving. You two are. You brought her here, you asked me to leave, and now the person who is legally required to vacate this property is you. Both of you. Willow snatched up her weekender bag, the expensive leather protesting the sudden rough handling. She wasn't an emotional woman, she was a transactional one. And this transaction had just plummeted in value. You said you had a house, Jake, she hissed at him. You said you were secure. You told me she was going to be gone by next week. The argument between them started to boil, loud and ugly, right in front of the wreath. Willow, realizing she had hitched her wagon to a man who didn't even own his own domicile, was turning on him fast. The introduction was over. The game was on. The introduction of Willow had successfully escalated the conflict into pure, chaotic drama. Now, instead of one person trying to evict me, it was two, but they were no longer a unified front. Willow was standing there, radiating fury and calculation, seeing her luxurious next chapter evaporate before her eyes, and Jake was sweating buckets, trying desperately to manage two women, one he was trying to dump and one he was trying to impress, while facing the legal reality of being homeless. Don't be dramatic, Willow, Jake whined, attempting to pull her close again, but she stiffened and pushed him away. The betrayal I felt earlier was starting to be replaced by a very satisfying sense of cold, vindictive power. This was the turning point, the moment his carefully constructed lie came crashing down. Dramatic? You invited me to move into a house that isn't yours. Willow pointed a perfectly manicured finger at his chest. I left my apartment, Jake. I gave notice. Where am I supposed to go? You lied to me. It's just temporary, honey. Rachel and I will sort out the divorce and the house will revert back to me in the settlement, he insisted, still holding on to the delusion that he could control the legal outcome simply because he wanted to. Oh really? I interjected, stepping closer. Tell her about the document, Jake. The one you signed under duress. The duress of your own overwhelming desire to protect your risky high-reward investment. The same one you never told me about. I walked calmly to the small desk in the corner. The desk where Jake kept his important papers, and pulled out a thick legal-sized envelope I had retrieved the night before from the safe deposit box. I knew I needed absolute proof, and I wasn't going to let this conversation continue based on memory alone. I pulled out a few key documents. Not the full stack, just the certified copies. The first was the transfer of deed. I held it up. Here it is, Willow. Page 1. Signed by Jacob M. Hayes and Rachel A. Hayes. Dated October 15th, 2 years ago. Sole ownership transferred to me. I let the paper drop slightly to emphasize the point. This is not a technicality. This is a legally recorded, fully executed deed. Willow's face went white. She wasn't an idiot. She recognized the significance of that document. She looked at Jake with pure disgust. You're fake, Jake. Fraud. You don't even own this house. I put the down payment on it. I pay the mortgage. Jake yelled, completely losing his cool, his voice high and desperate. You pay the mortgage on my house, I corrected him calmly. And regarding the down payment and the mortgage payments, that will all be settled in the divorce, Jake. But the ownership? It's mine. You know what this means, don't you? It means you are currently trespassing. This was the major plot shift, the legal revelation that made Jake instantly vulnerable. He realized the trap wasn't just hypothetical. It was physical, documented, and standing right in front of him. His betrayal had not only cost him his wife but also his home, his dignity, and his new trophy girlfriend. Willow, seeing a man whose financial security had just evaporated, needed no further convincing. She was already mentally calculating her losses. She turned on him, her voice a low, furious hiss. I can't believe I wasted my time. You're broke, aren't you? That whole investment fund story was probably just a lie to get the refinancing money out, wasn't it? Jake's silence was the only answer she needed. The revelation was crushing him. The man who had been so smug about giving me an eviction notice was now watching his carefully constructed future shatter. Get out of my way, Jake, Willow snarled, grabbing her bag again. I'm calling a cab. And don't ever contact me again. I'm not interested in squatters. She didn't even look at me on the way out, simply shoving past Jake, who stood there paralyzed by shock and self-pity. The front door slammed shut, echoing the final, devastating collapse of his plan. Now it was just us again. The quiet was heavy, punctuated only by Jake's ragged breathing. He looked absolutely broken, but not out of remorse. Pure transactional loss. See what you did, Rachel? He mumbled, rubbing his temples. You ruined it. You ruined my life. I ruined your life? I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You threw away 7 years of marriage, brought your girlfriend to my house and gave me a deadline to vacate, all because you wanted a different life. And now you're blaming me because I simply pointed out the legal reality that you created. I took a step closer, holding the deed stiffly. You tried to kick me out of my house, Jake. Your ego and your greed blinded you. You thought you were so clever, protecting your assets by transferring the deed to my name, never thinking that I would actually use that piece of paper to protect myself from you. The rising drama was intense. He had lost his backup and now he was cornered. His anger melted into fear and then, sickeningly, into desperation. He took a hesitant step toward me. Rachel, listen to me. We can fix this. We can talk about the divorce. Just say that paper is a mistake. Say you'll sign it back over to me. We'll split the assets 50-50 fair and square. Please. His voice was thin, reeking of pathetic pleading. He had moved from arrogant eviction notice giver to pitiful beggar in about 10 minutes flat. 50-50. I repeated, raising my voice slightly. You just offered me a decent settlement to get out by Christmas. Now you're offering 50-50 for a house that is legally 100% mine? That's not much of an incentive, Jake. I'll give you 70%. 75. He was practically groveling now. We can pretend this Willow thing never happened. We can go to counseling. I was just stressed. The job is insane. I made a mistake, Rachel, a huge, stupid mistake. The crocodile tears were starting glistening in his eyes. But I had seen the cold calculation in his face too many times now to be moved. I remembered the flat, heartless tone of his eviction order. I remembered the smugness. I remembered Willow surveying my hard work with contempt. "You didn't make a mistake, Jake," I said, my voice hardening. "You made a choice. You chose her, you chose the lie, and you chose to throw me out. And now I'm choosing me. And I'm choosing my home." I looked at the deed in my hand. It was more than just a piece of paper. It was my legal shield, my victory, and the physical manifestation of his spectacular self-sabotage. The power was intoxicating, and it was entirely justified. I didn't need his pity, and I certainly didn't need his desperate, transactional love. Jake was a mess. The transition from confident, cheating husband to desperate, sniveling puppy was complete. He had sunk to his knees by the sofa, looking utterly defeated, his face buried in his hands. It was a pathetic sight, and yet I felt absolutely no pity. I had seen the true colors of his intent, and they were ugly and self-serving. "Rachel, please." His voice was muffled and choked. "Think about this. Where am I going to go? I don't have anywhere to live. I have credit cards, the car loan, the investment is struggling. If I have to rent an apartment, I'm ruined. We built this together, Rachel, you can't just take it all." "I can't just take it all?" I repeated, leaning over the back of the sofa, letting the full force of my controlled anger wash over him. "Jake, you didn't just ask me to leave, you demanded it. You were planning a life with Willow in this house before Christmas, using my equity as collateral for your bad decisions. You wanted me out, Jake. And now, I'm simply granting your wish, only I'm reversing the recipient of the eviction notice." The twist was this. He thought his temporary legal maneuver was reversible with a simple request. He thought my 7 years of dedication to him meant I would automatically sacrifice my legal right to keep him safe from the consequences of his actions. He was wrong. "You said you'd sign the deed back," he insisted, looking up at me, his eyes red and frantic. "I signed the deed that night 2 years ago to protect our home, Jake. From your risky investments," I reminded him. "You convinced me it was necessary, remember? What's different now is that the biggest threat to my home isn't some outside creditor. It's you. You're the one who wants to destroy our marriage and replace me. And I'm still protecting the house from the person who tried to kick me out of it." I took a deep breath. This was the resolution, the final closure on this terrible chapter. I wasn't going to drag this out. I needed clean, swift separation. "Get up, Jake," I commanded, my voice flat and final. He slowly rose, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I called a friend earlier today, Jake," I said, holding up the envelope containing the deed. "Not a divorce lawyer, we'll get there, but a legal aid specializing in property rights. We're protected by the specific language in this transfer document, which your own lawyer wrote to make the change permanent, for asset protection purposes. It's ironclad." I walked over to the front door, mirroring the exact spot he had been standing when he delivered his ultimatum. "You have exactly 48 hours to remove your personal belongings. I'm changing the locks and the security code on Friday at noon. Anything left here after that will be itemized and put into storage, billed to you." The total shock in his eyes was almost pitiful. 48 hours? Rachel, be reasonable. I need time to find a place. "I needed time to find a place too, Jake," I countered, the memory of his cold pronouncement still stinging. "But you wanted me gone by the end of the month. 48 hours is generous. You've got a car, a decent job, and apparently a struggling investment to keep you warm. You'll figure it out. I'll fight this in court. I'll tell the judge you tricked me," he threatened, falling back on bluster. "Go ahead," I said, a genuine calm smile finally touching my lips. "Tell the judge you, a successful financial analyst, were tricked by your naive stay-at-home wife into signing over the legal ownership of your property. And then explain why you rushed me to sign those documents under duress so you could get your hands on the refinancing money. I have the bank statements showing the withdrawal immediately following the signing. You had motive, Jake, and you executed the transfer. I just benefited from your greed." He knew I was right. His ego was too big to admit to a judge that he had been so careless, or that he had used me as a financial shield. He had sealed his own fate. He stood there, defeated, looking at the house that was no longer his. He looked at the oversized wreath I had just hung crookedly. I can't believe you're doing this," he whispered. "Believe it," I affirmed. "You wanted a divorce. You wanted a new life. And now you're getting exactly that, Jake. Just not in the house you thought. I watched him go, grabbing only his keys and phone, leaving Willow's abandoned monogrammed bag sitting awkwardly by the sofa. The sound of the door closing behind him was the sweetest sound I had heard in months. The sound of freedom, the sound of the resolution of a very long, very painful chapter. I didn't rush to change the locks that minute. I sat down on my sofa, looked at the crooked wreath, and just let out a long, shaky breath of relief. It took a few days to process, and the divorce proceedings were ugly, but the property issue was always resolved in my favor thanks to his own sloppy legal work. Jake had to liquidate some of his assets, including his struggling investment, just to cover the legal fees and the small equity settlement I magnanimously offered just to make him sign the final papers quickly. He never got to move Willow in. He ended up renting a tiny, expensive apartment far across town, forced to start his new life from a position of debt and humiliation, all because he forgot the details of the contract he'd signed. The house is quiet now. I took down the wreath eventually. I might even paint the living room a softer gray, just not for Willow. I'll do it for me. This is my house, my sanctuary, and my hard-won peace. It was a nasty way to get there, but standing here, the sole owner, I finally feel secure. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed watching Jake get the instant karma he deserved, please drop a comment below, like this video, and subscribe for more true stories of sweet, sweet revenge.